Hello everybody, here we are back for another videotape of the essence of regression. And what I want to do in this presentation is I want to really get to what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the essence of regression. So here we're going to get into certain real essentials. And so what I'm going to talk about is really a gateway or like a port, like out in the universe, like if you were traveling like in Star Trek or something, and you want to go through a port to get to another dimension. Well, it's kind of like that. It is for regression because it gets you to the real essentials of it in a way that I think will really help to, I use the word simplify, or bring your understanding of regression into a very concise place where you'll have a much more familiar understanding with regression after we're through, not only with this discussion, because this is part of a series of discussions, but this is the first part of the series of discussions. So let's go and let's start getting on this vehicle to get to these real important essentials of regression, which I believe are going to very much help your understanding and use of regression. All right. Okay, there is a phrase that is often heard in regression, which in my view is really a central thesis of regression. It's also a phrase that is used a lot, but people don't necessarily know what it means. It gets used a lot, people say it a lot, but if you were to inquire as to persons' understandings of it, you may quite possibly not get a satisfactory answer. So we're going to break it down. We're going to deconstruct it, this phrase, indicated right here. So here you are right here. This is the phrase. We're going to deconstruct this phrase over a series of videos, and in so doing, to start to communicate to you certain essentials of regression that really get to it in a very essential way, real essential way, what regression is. Okay, let's get started. The phrase we want to focus on is the fit of the model with the data. And you'll often hear this phrase in regression. So people will talk about the fit of the model with the data. So the fit of the model with the data. And they'll talk about, well, how good is the fit of the model with the data? Or what can we say about the fit of the model with the data? And people may say, well, we have a good fit of the model with the data. Or we have a fair fit or a moderate fit. Or we have a poor fit of the model with the data. Okay, so what does that phrase mean, and what does that phrase have to tell us about regression in this most fundamental way of what regression is? Let's get started with this breaking down or deconstructing of the phrase, the fit of the model with the data. And we're going to do it in 3 parts, and it focuses on particular phrases within this whole phrase, the fit of the model with the data. And so we have the fit. And what do we mean by that? The fit. And the model. And what do we mean by that when we talk about the model? And the data. And what do we mean by that when we talk about the data? And so the fit of the model with the data. And this first part in the series, we're going to break down, we're going to deconstruct this entire phrase by working backwards. We're going to start with, well, what is the data? So we talk about the data. Within this phrase, the fit of the model with the data. Well, what is the data? What are we referring to within this phrase? And then we're going to move on to, in another presentation, not this one, the model. And what do we mean by the model? And then we're going to move on to, in another presentation, the fit. And what do we mean by the fit? So let's start then with the data. So get my markers here. I have a healthy supply of markers. And so now I'll move over to this one. Let's start talking about what we mean by the data within the phrase. So not just generally speaking when we say the data, but what do we mean when we say the data within the phrase, the fit of the model with the data? Within that phrase, what do we mean by the data? Okay, to talk about that, I want you to engage in a theater of the mind. Now, in engaging in this theater of the mind, I want you to be careful about this, because you could be listening to this perhaps in your car while you're driving. And if you were to engage in this theater of the mind too well while you're driving, you could end up in a bad situation driving, because you'd like be all into the theater of the mind with this, and you really should be watching the road, okay? So if you're driving or operating heavy machinery, probably don't want to engage in theory of the mind. Look at that. Well, there is a theory of the mind, but theater of the mind with this. You probably want to wait till some other time. But if you're in a location where you can get into this in terms of your imagination and theater of the mind, then I have something I want to do with you. So let's do it. Regression, and talking about multiple regression, people can get very complex about it. I don't know if you've had this experience. I really think you have. If you're a student in a statistics class and they're talking about regression, the textbook often launches very quickly into real fine detail and into the weeds about regression, and can show real complex. I'm thinking of a textbook right now where they're showing like this, three-dimensional model of a regression plot and things like this. They just immediately can get into the weeds and into very complex material about regression. And so the student right from the very beginning can be left with the impression that regression, and multiple regression in particular, and that's what we're focused on here, is multiple regression, is this super complex thing and super abstract thing that is real intimidating and difficult for the student to get their mind around. The theater of the mind that I want you to engage in now really brings things down to brass tacks. Okay? Really brings things down to the basics. And I want you to imagine what is involved in collecting data if you're going to be analyzing data using a multiple regression approach. What does the data collection look like? Okay? And for engaging in this theater of the mind, I want you to pretend that you are in a room with, let's say, 10 other people. Now, of course, for multiple regression analyses, we're going to have sample sizes of much larger than 10 people. But just let's imagine that there are 10 people in the room and you're one of the people in the room. And you are going to, well, you're one of the people in the room, and I'm going to collect data from you for a multiple regression analysis. All right. Well, for illustrating this, just to start, I want to put, if you've seen other videos that I've presented, if you haven't, then you're going to see it here for the first time. I'm not going to get into great detail about it. If you've seen other videos, then this is an old friend by now. Okay, so it's an old friend, and that's the regression equation. So it might not be, though, for some of you, this may be, maybe this is the first video of what I present that you've seen. But at some point you'll see videos on the regression equation. But if you've already seen the regression equation, it should be an old friend by now. Let's just go ahead. And here we have the regression equation. And as you know, we like to dress up the regression equations. We put a hat on it, right there, that's the hat on the y. And that is the predicted value on the outcome variable measure that we're going to get from our model. And here's our model, and it starts with a constant, and then we have a unstandardized regression coefficient value, b sub 1, for our first predictor variable, and then plus b sub 2, and that's our unstandardized regression coefficient value for our second predictor variable, x sub 2, plus b sub 3, this is an unstandardized regression coefficient value for our third predictor variable, x sub 3. And let's go ahead and let's make this a little bit easier to appreciate. So here we have our first unstandardized regression coefficient value for our first predictor variable, and then our second unstandardized regression coefficient value for our second predictor variable, and our third unstandardized regression coefficient value for our third predictor variable. Okay, so this helps separate it out so it doesn't look like such a jumble of black markings here. Okay, so that's our regression equation. And what I want you to start to imagine in this theater of the mind that you are engaging in, while you're imagining yourself in a room with 10 other people, and I'm going to be collecting data from you for a multiple regression analysis, I want you to be thinking of that relative to, or in terms of, this regression equation. And so here's how you'll start to do that. Okay, so we have our outcome variable, and let's say that the outcome variable is concerned with organizational commitment, and we're seeking to understand variance in our outcome variable, or in scores on a measure of organizational commitment, in terms of this model. And as you will discover in other presentations, it ultimately comes down to in terms of person scores on these predictor variable measures. But just more generally speaking, we're seeking to understand variance, higher and lower scores on this measure of organizational commitment, which is our outcome variable, in terms of the model, or this particular set of predictor variables. And so let's say that our first predictor variable is job satisfaction, and our second predictor variable is employee salary. And our third predictor variable is employees' perceptions of the positiveness of their work environment. Okay, so now I want to collect data for a multiple regression analysis. My first question to you is, and you're looking at this regression equation, how many measures are going to be in a stack of measures that I hand to you and each of the other 10 people in the room? Because that's what I'm going to do for this data collection effort. I'm going to hand a stack of measures to each one of you and ask you to fill it out. And the question I'm asking you is, how many measures are going to be in that stack of measures? Da 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 da. You don't have to answer it, by the way, in the form of a question. Da 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 dun 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 dun. Okay, what's your answer? I'll wait to hear. No, that's not right. No, that person said that wasn't accurate. Okay, I'm waiting to hear from you. Okay, I'm engaged in a theater of the mind here too. I can see you in this room, and you have, each of you have this stack of measures. No, that's not right either. Okay, so how many measures are in the stack of measures that each one of you are holding right now? Okay, you said someone said 3. But see what you're doing, I think you're saying, okay, you have a measure of job satisfaction to fill out, and then you're going to be asked to indicate your employee's salary. So I guess that could be seen as a measure, probably like one question. And then you'll also be given a measure of your perception of the positiveness of the work environment. So that is 3 measures, but you're leaving a measure out. What's that measure? Yeah, okay. Yes, exactly. 4 measures. That is the answer. There are 4 measures in this stack of measures that each one of you have received to fill out, because you also have the measure for the outcome variable. So you have a measure of organizational commitment. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 measures that are in the stack of measures that each one of you is being asked to fill out. Okay? And so you go ahead and now imagine yourself filling out this stack of measures. And in the stack of measures, you have a measure you're going to fill out regarding your level of organizational commitment. You're going to have a measure that you're going to fill out regarding your job satisfaction. You're going to have a measure, so to speak, it's probably just like one question, regarding your salary. And you're going to have a measure that you fill out regarding your perception of the positiveness of the work environment. So I'll go ahead and I'll wait for you to fill out that stack of measures. Where's my phone when I need it? I could be looking up something right now. Oh, okay. Oh, you're starting to raise your hands. Okay. Okay. Well, yes. Okay. Oh, I have a TA. Yeah. I'm gonna get the stacks of measures. I got a TA. Go ahead and get the stack of measures, please. Okay, so we get it from this person, okay, and you got the stack of measures. And by the way, each of these stacks of measures, we have 4 measures, right? And we get it from each of the TA. Gets it from each of the people in the room, including you, along with the other 10 people. Okay, and so I go ahead. Thank you very much. Okay, I got the stack of measures from each of the, actually 11 people in the room, because there's you and then there's the 10 other people in the room. And I have these 11 stacks of measures, one from each person. And in each stack of those measures, I have a measure of organizational commitment that's been filled out. a measure of job satisfaction that's been filled out, a measure in terms of a question about employee salary that's been indicated, and I have a measure of positiveness of the work environment that's been filled out. Okay, great. So now what I'm going to do, that I've got a stack of measures from each of the people in the room, is I'm going to start scoring these measures. So as the researcher, I'm going to start scoring the measures in each of the stack of measures. And so here I go. I take the first stack, okay, consisting of 4 measures, and it came from you. Okay, whoever you are in this theater of the mind exercise, I got your stack of 4 measures that you filled out. And I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to start, for each of these stacks of measures, I'm only going to score for right now. I'll score all the measures eventually. But for right now, for each of these stacks of measures, from each of the 11 people in the room, including you, the measure I'm going to score is the measure on the outcome variable, organizational commitment. Okay, so here I go. I'm going to do it for your particular measure, the one you filled out. Okay, and so you answered this question this way, and you answered this question this way. Let's say it's on a Likert scale. By the way, you'll notice I use the word Likert, L-I-K-E-R-T, not Likert, Likert. Pronounce the guy's name right, please. Guy's dead, he can't even defend himself anymore. Likert, okay? And there's a 1 to 5 Likert scale associated with each of the questions on this measure of organizational commitment. And so on each of the questions, you get a score anywhere from 1 to 5. And so I see how you've answered each one of the items on this measure of organizational commitment. That's the outcome variable measure. And you get a score from 1 to 5 on each one of the items. Okay, and I go ahead and I add up those scores across the items. And if there are 10 items on the measure, and on each item you can get a score from 1 to 5, that means the minimum score you can get is 10, and the maximum score you can get is 50, right? Because if you had 5 on each of the 10 items, 5 times 10 is 50. So you can get a score anywhere from 10 to 50 on the outcome variable measure of organizational commitment. And let's say that for you over there, I add up your responses to each of the items on this outcome variable measure of organizational commitment, and your actual observed score on this outcome variable measure of organizational commitment is 35. Okay, 35 for you. Okay, so that takes care of organizational commitment for that stack of measures. I'm also going to score, by the way, the measures on each of the predictor variables. But right now I'm just going to score the measure for organizational commitment, the outcome variable. Okay, so now I take another stack of measures from some other person who's engaged in this theater of the mind activity. And I got the stack of measures. There's 4 measures in the stack of measures. And I'm going to take out the measure on the outcome variable of organizational commitment. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add up your responses to each of the 10 items. And it adds up, let's see, to, here the person got an 18. So that's their actual observed score on that measure, this outcome variable measure of organizational commitment. This person got an actual observed score of 18. Okay, let's do one more, because I see someone over there, they engaged in this theater of the mind exercise also, and they want their outcome variable measure scored as well. So, okay, so let me take their stack of 4 measures, and I'll go over here and I'll take it, and I'll look at it. Okay, very good. Now take out the measure that's on the outcome variable, organizational commitment for this person, and I'll go ahead and I'll look across the 10 items, and I'll score how they responded to each of the 10 items on the different Likert response scales, and add it up, and this person gets a score of 42, and that's their actual observed score on this outcome variable measure of organizational commitment. For this person, the score is 42. Okay. And I do that for each of the 11 people in the room, and then I have an actual observed score on the outcome variable measure for organizational commitment for each of the 11 persons in the room. That is what we mean by the data in the phrase, the fit of the model with the data. The data are those actual observed scores on the outcome variable measure, in this case of organizational commitment. That's what the data is within the phrase, the fit of the model with the data. The data are those actual observed scores that you provided, the 11 people in the room provided, after you filled out the measure on the outcome variable measure, in this case on organizational commitment, you got an actual observed score, each of you, 11 people in the room, on that outcome variable measure. So those actual observed scores on the outcome variable measure that each of you got after having completed the measure and my scoring it, those actual observed scores on the outcome variable measure, in this example of organizational commitment, that's the data. The data is referring to those actual observed scores on the outcome variable measure, in this case, of organizational commitment. So you'll notice what the data is not within this phrase, the fit of the model with the data. It is not persons' actual observed scores on the predictor variable measures. It is persons' actual observed scores on the outcome variable measure, in this case of organizational commitment. That is what is meant by the data within the phrase, the fit of the model with the data. So what does that tell us then about that phrase so far? That phrase is saying we're concerned with the fit of the model with the actual observed scores that people got on the outcome variable measure. The data. Okay. So let that settle in your mind. We're concerned about the fit of the model with persons' actual observed scores on the outcome variable measure. That's what we mean by with the data. So let that settle in your mind. Appreciate what the data is within the phrase, the fit of the model with the data. Those actual observed scores on the outcome variable measure. And we will continue this discussion talking about what we mean by the model in, well, really what will be the next presentation. You have a good one. Oh, my producer is reminding me I have to do something I haven't really gotten in the habit of doing yet. Oh, this is great. These people are telling me they think it's a cool thing that I do, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to get in the spirit. I have not gotten all that used to doing this. So you're like seeing this really in an early stage. Later I'll just be doing it, because I've done it so many times. But no, this is really early on. I forgot to do it. They're sitting in the back there going, okay, I got you. I'm going to do it. Okay, I'll remember in the future. I'm going to sign it. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to kind of still get my style and my groove for signing things. There we go. Okay, like that. And I always like to do a little face. So let's see, what's the face for today? Okay, well, let's see, we got a face like that. And I'm always feeling happy talking with you, so it always has a happy expression on the face, because I just love talking with you and going over this material. Having you get, in this case, in this series of presentations, of what we mean by the fit, what we mean by the model, what we mean by the data within this phrase, the fit of the model with the data, getting to this real essentials about regression. I mean, I love talking with you about regression anyway, but this really makes me happy. So we definitely have a happy look on this face, but let's add a little bit more to it. First of all, I like doing this, putting some hair where hair is not currently present. It used to be, but not anymore. It's kind of sad. I look at myself in these tapes. Well, anyway. But here, I can have hair anyway. Gosh, look at this. I mean, I really got hair here, don't I? And then let's go take a clue from the Y here. The Y is wearing a hat, so I'll wear a hat too. Like this, like that. There. Yeah, we're going to fill it in a little bit here. There we go. Cool. There we are. Hair and a hat. My name. Coolest. Talk with you later.